Welcome to the DGT Monday show. The Democrats of Greater Tucson, the DGT.org, is a membership-based political action committee here in Arizona. We are Democrats doing democracy. We have a weekly forum in which we talk to candidates for public office, office holders of public office, as well as party officials who are holding office in the party, and policy experts to help bring you the latest in what's going on in policy in your local area so you can become more adept and more knowledgeable about what's going on in public affairs. We have this every Monday. We have in the past always had this at noon, but recently we have changed it, as you have noticed today, to be either noon or 6 p.m. depending on the convenience and wishes of the candidate or official and their availability on the schedule. So we're here today at the 6 p.m. time talking today. Correct my pronunciation if you choose to there, Chris. Chris Donat.
Donnet.
Chris Donnet. Chris is running for Congress in CD6. That's the seat currently held by Juan Ciscomani. He will be running in the primary next year, as well as if he passes through the primary, the general election next year to take on Ciscomani directly. Chris grew up in Cleveland, and he's a product of the public schools there. He really enjoyed science and astronomy and was actively involved in music, and he plays multiple instruments. His love for Arizona started early on when he was inspired by the TV show Hey Dude, and that eventually led him to Tucson, where he studied mechanical engineering, Italian, and was a member of his marching band at University of Arizona. So yeah,
hey,
fellow nerd, welcome.
right.
After he earned his BS in mechanical engineering, Chris embarked on his career beginning with the design of industrial automation equipment. Boy, does that sound hard. He later transitioned into medical device development, including the design of wheelchair lifts, peptide synthesizers for drug research, and most notably, contributing to the Ventana HE600, a revolutionary instrument for cancer diagnostics while at Roche in Oro Valley. And full disclosure, my wife worked there until they were acquired. Ventana until they were acquired by Roche. Now she works for Roche as well. So fellow Roche employee, or at least ex-employee. Following a 2-year stint for Roche's hematology instrument division in Boston, he returned to Tucson and currently designs precision control actuation systems for Raytheon. Chris is now decided that he wants to do some public service and decided to throw his hat into the ring for Congressional District 6 to go to the House of Representatives for the United States of America on behalf of Arizona. So welcome, Chris. Thanks for joining us.
Oh, thanks, Michael. Thanks for having me. Yeah, it's been a bit of a ride, but yes, thanks again. My name is Chris Donnet, and I am running for Congress in CD6. It was not a light decision, but as many of us had been sitting up watching the election transpire in November, I was outraged that the current president was reelected to another term after the disaster of the first term. And I was disappointed that Juan Ciscomani got reelected because of that, which gave the Republicans control of the House again. I had been working for years on some friends of mine, a couple of lawyers in town, who I thought would have been good candidates for this seat since 2018. And they were like, no, we don't want to do it. It's not for us. And I said, well, if it's not you guys, then I guess it has to be me. So it was pretty late in November that I decided to have a conversation with a group of friends of mine, say, guys, listen, I'm going to have to do this because nobody else is. And the way that my life is makes it a little bit easier for me. Granted, I have a full-time job, but I don't have a family that I have to worry, or an immediate family of my own to worry about. So it gives me a little bit of flexibility where people raising young kids might not have that. I chose this seat in particular because the issues facing our district are just so great in scale that it would be the only level of government that can have the funding available to tackle these issues and to put Arizona on the right direction for the next 50 years or 100 years. Just to give a little bit more information about myself on my background, obviously I'm from Cleveland. My family immigrated to this country over the course of the early 1900s and late 1800s. So my family story is very similar to most other Americans. There's immigration, there's service to country, and then there's, working hard for a middle class lifestyle. My mom's dad, was a union member for 45 years for Goodyear Tire as an electrician. And on that income, he was able to raise three kids and take care of my grandmother, buy a house, have a boat, have lots of activities, go on weeks of vacation every year. And it's not lost on me sometimes when I hear, the slogan, MAGA, or Make America Great Again. I would say that we are not, it doesn't seem to me that we have the same level of opportunity for the young people coming up to have the same kind of experience and possibilities in life. Housing is so expensive, education is expensive, childcare is ridiculously expensive, and these all get in the way of being able to make it in life. I mean, even for myself, the house that I live in, I got lucky that I bought it before interest rates went up, because if I had to buy my house now, I wouldn't be I wouldn't be able to afford it. And that doesn't make a lot of sense. I've only lived here for a couple of years in this particular house. So some things have to be looked at and changed. In order to do that, we have to, as a party, come to the realization that, our current executive branch and the supporters in the legislature throwing out crazy things on a daily basis, multiple crazy things. And we have to be cautious as to what we respond to, because we want to make them respond to our ideas on how we're going to help people. If we talk about, let's say, healthcare, we could say, we can get your healthcare for half price, and you don't have to, go into bankruptcy if something happens to you. We should be hammering them on that, because they're trying to take away healthcare. They're trying to take away Medicaid from so many people in this district. Juan Ciscomani is complicit in that, and he says, "Oh no, please don't do it," but he is still voting along with his fellow Republicans and supporting this president. The pillars of my campaign focus on policies that will give back time to people, which will allow them to achieve access to what my middle class upbringing was. So with that, I would like to actually start with healthcare. And it's no secret that I am 100% all in on Medicare for all, or single payer healthcare. Having worked for Roche for 7 years, I've had some insight into this industry, and there are huge profits in medical device, pharmaceuticals, which we are being taken advantage of simply in this country. I mean, if you look at the most common drug that's being prescribed right now in the United States, Ozempic, that costs us a little less than $1,000 a month on average. But if you go to Germany, it costs $60 a month. And I can guarantee you that it doesn't cost that much less to manufacture in Germany. In fact, I'm actually not sure where it's manufactured, but it's probably manufactured in one or two places. So that doesn't make any sense, and it's simply that we're being taken advantage of. We see nonstop advertisements for ask your doctor about this drug or that drug, but it's clear to me that with 7 years of medical school and all of the training afterwards, your doctor knows what medicines will work for your condition when you go to see your doctor. So they're essentially hawking less efficacious drugs to get you to ask your doctor about them, and your doctor will maybe prescribe them to you and make them more money. So these are some of the things that I'd like to see go away that can help lower healthcare costs. Obviously, being able to negotiate prices and set prices so they're consistent across regions or different hospitals, that goes a long way. Europeans pay about 1/3 as much as we do on healthcare. They live several years longer and they live healthier years. So we're getting a really raw deal. The average person, I think, spends $12,000 a year. I looked up what my health insurance costs. It's about $8,000 a year through Raytheon, with $1,300 coming out of my own pocket. And private insurance and through the employer hides kind of some of these costs that are going on in the background. I mean, when my employer renegotiates rates, I just sign up for it at the end of the year and it is what it is. But all of these drugs, they're just paying it. They pay whatever it is, and we're blind to what the individual costs of those things are, and the bills are incredibly complicated. I can tell you that with my insurance, I went to the primary care physician in January and then a follow-up last month. And through the ACA, we're supposed to have a free wellness check. Well, neither of those visits were considered wellness. They both came with bills, and they both came with bills that were coming in at different times for several $100s each. So I have to get on the phone with the hospital, or I have to get on the phone with the insurance company. So it's a very inefficient system. Private business got into this back in around the 40s and 50s, and it was because it wasn't taxable, and then they locked that in. Eisenhower, I believe, locked that in for not paying taxes on healthcare benefits. But it's the worst thing, because if you lose your job, you shouldn't lose your healthcare, because when you lose your job, you're under a lot of stress and things happen. So again, single payer would be beneficial for absolutely everybody in this country, and that's what we have to do on that. So moving on, AI and automation. Automation, obviously, I'm pretty familiar with, and AI, one of my advisors is pretty tight on that topic. We have to be concerned only from the standpoint that these tools, they could potentially replace the need for a lot of human labor, but I'm more concerned about where the rewards of these capabilities go. I don't want Mark Zuckerberg and Elon Musk becoming even wealthier and wealthier because they're sopping up all of the gains from these tools. I want to make sure that AI and automation benefits all people, all workers in this country equally. And in order to do that, I think I have two concepts on how we can tackle that. One is to give guaranteed paid time off. It's something that in the industrialized world, we're one of the few countries that doesn't actually do that. But what that does is it gives money back to people to be able to take a day off if they have a sick child, or if they have a doctor's appointment, or if they want to go on vacation. I've worked at a company before where I didn't get any vacation in the first year, and that's impossible. I was very sick for a week, and I was told I better come in, which is, that's no way to live. I wouldn't want that for anybody. More importantly, though, we should look into, and I will look into, shortening the work week. We got stuck on a 40-hour work week again back in the 30s and 40s. Henry Ford kind of set the precedent on that in the 20s, but there's no magic about 40 hours. I wholeheartedly believe that if we were to work 32 hours a week, we wouldn't be any less productive. The last hour or hour and a half of a day that you're working is not nearly as productive as the first hour. And by doing this, we would allow people an extra day of their week. And why is that important? Well, let's talk about childcare again. There was the American Rescue Plan Act that was passed during COVID. And on average, we were able to reduce childcare costs by about 10% per family. But if you reduce the work week by 1 day, 1 out of 5, I can reduce childcare costs by 20% and make it equitable for people who do not have children as well. And there's additional benefits to that. If you live if you have a 2-parent household and you could stagger your days, you could potentially save 40% on childcare if that was something that you could work out. So, I think, again, for people who want to raise families, and this is a pro-family position, which should be bipartisan, we can really put a lot of time back in people's pockets. Another thing you could use this time for is going to school. If you want to move up in your career or you need some additional training, you don't have to stop working. I mean, that's a huge burden. If you have to quit your job or reduce your hours and then also pay for school at the same time, that's a very expensive proposition. Like for instance, if I want to go get an MBA, that would be very difficult for me. So having an extra day off would be very beneficial to people, and that's why we need to look into those policies, and that will help ensure additional gains in productivity are shared with all workers and all Americans. Moving on from that, let's talk about infrastructure a little bit. And this is kind of my forte here because of my engineering background. And I don't have to tell anybody on this call how important water is in Arizona, particularly in southern Arizona where we are. We pull about 2 million acre feet of water out of the Colorado for the Central Arizona project every year. And that water is going to become less and less available. And there are going to be more and more disputes between the upper basin states and the lower basin states, which is us in California and Nevada. So what do I propose for the solution of that? Well, one is the most bang for our buck is being more efficient in the way that we use water. And actually, Nevada is a state that we could learn a little bit from. I mean, Arizona is actually very, very good about being efficient with the use of water for municipal use. Where we're bad with using water is agriculture. Over 70% of our state's water is used for watering crops. And obviously, turning off the faucet when you're brushing your teeth is important, but it's not gonna make a dent in that 70% that's being flood irrigated for alfalfa or cotton. So again, going back to the municipalities though, recycled water in cities, Tucson is working on this right now. There need to be additional projects for, I think Sierra Vista and maybe Safford could benefit from this as well. And from a federal perspective, this is something that I would definitely get on board for funding this infrastructure to build for the cities. As far as the crops are concerned, we need to evaluate other crops to grow if we're going to continue farming in this state. And there are good options. Waiule, which is a shrub, is very valuable from the standpoint that it's essentially a rubber producing plant, and it's kind of a perennial. It takes a couple years to grow. And the advantage of that is there's less soil tilling, so you have a healthier soil, but very valuable material. And there's a lot of research going into that at the University of Arizona currently. And I would definitely support funding of that research and funding farmers to help transition them to crops that require less water, and also to water those crops in more effective ways. Maybe not flood irrigation, but maybe drip irrigation. And there's other options there. But a lot of our agricultural output is leafy greens like lettuce, maybe some strawberries, tomatoes, and a lot of that's grown in Yuma, so it's not in this district, but they're still using Colorado River water, and anything that we can leave in the Colorado is good for either for the upper basin states or more that we can take out for the cities. So the interesting thing about these plants is that they can fairly well grow indoors in what's called controlled environment agriculture. And what that entails is growing these plants hydroponically in many cases, using fully recycled water. So they're not drawing additional water out of the Colorado for this. Uses far less land, like essentially 1/5 the land for these crops. And there's no pesticides, there's no herbicides, which there's links to some health effects because of all of the exposure that we're having with that. And you can control the nutrition content of these by adjusting the spectrum of the LED lighting. And so this is why this hasn't been done for decades. I mean, a lot of the LED technology just didn't exist until 20, 25 years ago. The downside is it takes a huge amount of electricity to power these lights and to power the HVAC, or the heating and ventilation and air conditioning of these facilities. So that leads me to, okay, well, if we need huge amounts of energy, we need to build green energy. So more solar, more other sources, and I'll get to that later. But that rolls into, everything's interconnected here. Lastly, to absolutely ensure our supply of fresh water in this state, we need to truly work hand in hand with Mexico, with the state of Sonora, on the Sea of Cortez, and ensure that we have the ability to produce fresh water from seawater via desalination. I realize that there's controversial aspects of desalination, some of them being environmental with the salt that you've potentially put back into the water. You know, that's fair. That's more of an engineering problem, and the Israelis and the Saudis have been doing this for many years. So I'm confident in the technology that we can come to a solution there. The other difficulty is obviously working with Mexico, but I think that this would build quite a few bridges between our nations. We're obviously having a tough time right now, and I'd like to see us work very well with our neighbor to the south. My whole life, it's been a very peaceful coexistence, and we're lucky in the world to have such good neighbors. And with that water supply, we can guarantee that we can build housing when we need to. We would always have, you know, there's that 100-year supply rule. We would have that. We can produce all of the water that we need for our cities that way. Is it cheap? No. Would it get cheaper over time? Yes. But we're not going to be watering alfalfa with it, that's for sure. So going back to the energy front, again, with AI, with server farms, with all of the chip manufacturing plants that they've put in Phoenix, with all of the electrification. I mean, think about all of our automobiles. Pretty soon we're all going to be driving electric cars that need to be plugged in. We need a lot more electricity. Our electricity demand in the state is expected to grow, I believe, around our demand is, I think, up to 50% more. And we cannot do that the way that the Trump administration wants to do it, is, you know, reactivating coal plants. That's unacceptable as far as I'm concerned. What we need to be doing is covering all of our buildings with solar panels and also building nuclear power plants and other advanced energy sources. Advanced nuclear power plants and small modular reactor designs are very, very safe now. And if you look at the history of American nuclear power, not a single person has ever died as a result of nuclear power, which is far, far better than what you could say about coal power or fossil fuels, just from the particulate matter alone. So I am a huge proponent of this, and I would work hard to figure out ways to implement these zero carbon energy sources. In addition to being a huge amount of electricity, all of the other things that use high carbon sources, like making steel or cement, making fertilizer, they all require high temperature processes. Well, nuclear power provides that with zero carbon, so we can decarbonize all these other industries, which would be difficult to do with only solar power. Moving on from energy, let's move on to transportation. And this is the last topic that I want to cover here. Again, I wrote an opinion piece in the Arizona Daily Star back in January about high-speed rail. And it is a passion of mine to be able to commute intracity at very reasonable speeds. I mean, again, high-speed rail has been around since the 1960s in Japan. This is not new technology. This is not Hyperloop or some far-flung technology. We can do this, and we have not been able to do it for several reasons, one of which is environmental regulations, which is ironic because building electrified transport between the cities is actually good for the environment. So in Congress, I would take it upon myself, as well as working with others, to review these laws and these regulations, NEPA, or the National Environmental Protection Act. They need to be revised for the 21st century. We need to be able to finish projects in a timely fashion. And I will say this about the Democratic Party. We have really good ideas, but we have to make sure that these ideas are doable in the period of a presidency, a 4-year term. Because when people don't see actual physical progress from things that we're promising, they think that it's not ever going to happen and become, turned off to the idea. And California is a perfect example of that, of a high-speed rail project horribly managed from the beginning. And I'm very sad that that happened, because the route between Tucson and Phoenix is an ideal route for building such infrastructure. It would raise wages because you would have access to all of the companies in Phoenix if you live in Tucson, and vice versa for people in Phoenix. It would lower airfare because you'd all of a sudden be able to fly out of Sky Harbor, taking even less time than going to the TIA and flying out and connecting out of Sky Harbor. And housing. I mean, think of the fact that there's a ton of housing options in Casa Grande or Eloy, Red Rock, where you'd still be able to get into work on green transport very quickly. So that's how that would elevate people's lives and give them more options. So that's the end of what I wanted to talk about as far as the pillars of what is important for Southern Arizona and also for the rest of the nation. But I just want to talk a little bit about my campaign and the organization as it is right now. I've been operating the campaign with two close advisors and myself at this point. One of them is on the call right now, Andrew Friedman, and he interned for the late Stephanie Tubbs Jones out of Cleveland in the House of Representatives. He studied political science at the University of Arizona, and he has a background in hospitality management and also accounting in the Las Vegas area. I've also known him since I was in third grade, so he's one of the smartest guys I know, and I'm fortunate to have him helping out here. We used to watch West Wing together in college, and I have to say, what a crock, that show. I think Andrew Sorkin needs to come back and redo it for real life. The second advisor that I have, his name is Scott Swindell. He was a member of the Peace Corps and served in South Africa. And he got a BS in physics back east, and then he got a master's degree in computer science from the University of Arizona, and he's currently working in development of AI. And he's on vacation this week, so he was unable to attend. As far as fundraising is concerned, we've more than doubled what we've brought in this quarter so far than we did last quarter, so we're at about $15,000. I understand that there have been people who have raised significantly more, and I get it, I understand, but I have to say $15,000 to me is quite a bit of money, and we're using that wisely, and we're going to use that coming up shortly here to start a fundraising campaign with Grassroots Analytics. And our first order of business when we achieve the rate that we're looking for is to staff up, including a campaign manager. I'm currently working at Raytheon full-time still. I've used nearly all of my PTO, but when we staff up, I will be going on a leave of absence and focusing on the campaign full-time. And until that occurs, I will continue canvassing along with friends and colleagues and volunteers. And I will continue doing meet and greet events like Donuts with Donut. So with that, I appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. That was a great presentation. I think many of us will appreciate your insight into many of these issues and probably agree with a heck of a lot of your positions. It sounds to me like you are definitely well versed in some of the policy steps that need to be taken by Congress in order to advance American interests. Before we could do any of this stuff, we have a fight. We have to fight to take back Congress. Yeah. We have to fight to fight off a fascist movement that's trying to concentrate all the power in the presidency. To ignore court orders, to neuter Congress, to take over congressional powers such as the power of the purse, and to evade oversight, evade accountability, blatantly break the Constitution, break laws, ignore people's constitutional rights. And so my question is quite simply, what qualifies you for that fight? How do you see the role of a congressman in this context of a fight to preserve our institutions, our rule of law, and our democracy? And should it come to pass, fingers crossed that it won't, but should it come to pass that there's some sort of attempt to not have an election for your seat, or not have an election once you're seated for the presidency. How do we fight back against that? So let's take a few minutes and think about those issues.
Yeah, that's a big one. Well, the first thing is obviously we need to make sure that the governor is reelected. We control our elections in the state, not just the governor, but the Secretary of State, Adrian Fontes. So that's number one, because without them in charge, there can be too much shenanigans with the elections in our state. And we saw it last election with Cochise County. Um, I am nervous about that, absolutely. For me, obviously taking back the House of Representatives is the most important thing that we can do running for office. Um, and by running on a message that can be a little bit more bipartisan for our district, and that's, I mean, I haven't tailored it to be that way. That these are things that I actually believe need to be done, but I do feel like they have some cross appeal. And if we hammer people on why these are important things and why are the Republicans not helping you live a more fruitful life and less, have a little bit more time in the bank to spend with your family, which again is kind of more of I mean, I like spending time with my family. In fact, my dad's visiting from Cleveland right now, but family is a conservative talking point all the time. I mean, we have to hammer them on those messages and say these are the actual things that we're going to do, because I have friends who are conservative and they will not listen to reason on pointing out blatantly unconstitutional things. And I mean, the most crazy thing that just happened, accepting a $300 million plane from a foreign country. We can't keep responding to these things. We just have to have a message of our own. If it comes to the point where they don't want to seat us when we show up in Washington, then I'm at a loss, because I'm not sure beyond armed conflict what happens. And that doesn't work in America. It's not the 1800s, and we're not divided by state. Think of it this way: California is super liberal, but there's still 4 million people who supported Donald Trump there. This is going to be, Northern Ireland on steroids. So I want to see an overwhelming win for the Democrat in this district, so that it's clear that our policies are popular and people will back us. I'm sorry, that's all I have on that. I'm not sure. Otherwise, I mean, we
Yeah,
almost need
well,
like
I would encourage
Batman
you
or
to give it some
something.
thought. Yeah, well, I would encourage you to give it some thought, because
Yeah.
one thing that we need is leaders who are prepared to lead the fight. So not just a policy, but also a movement. And that comes to Paul Stapleton Smith question in the chat here. And Lillian is waiting with her hand up very patiently. We're going to get to her question in just a second, but this is relevant. Paul Stapleton Smith says, have you helped organize or otherwise participated in the large protests and rallies to build our community power to fight against the ruthless lawlessness of the Trump machine? How will you lead this scaling up of solidarity in a meaningful way?
Yeah, I have participated. I was at the first hands off protest at Reed Park. I've protested outside of Siscomani's office. I also went to the Bernie Sanders rally a couple months ago. So I've been out there meeting people and talking to people, and really enjoy. It's I've not really been part of protests before, so it's been an interesting experience, and it's actually, it warms my heart to see so many other people come out, because all of the years that I've lived in Tucson, I've not seen anything like it. So
Mhm.
it means that I'm not crazy. I think everybody is really upset, and that's
Absolutely.
good.
You're
Yeah,
absolutely not crazy. What is going on in this
yeah,
country is unprecedented, and it's scary
yeah.
as hell. So Lillian, why don't you unmute and ask Chris your question?
Okay. My question is about the PFAS chemicals that I'm sure you're familiar with.
Yes.
And what people have discovered after the fact is the sewage that we use as fertilizer is heavily contaminated with PFAS. And the federal government has just for the first time come out with limits to how much PFAS can be in the water you drink. And if we're going to clean up our sewer water, and get rid of the PFAS, get it down to a low level, it's going to be very, very expensive to do. So
Mhm.
have you thought about that, or what
Well,
do you think?
so PFAS is not just localized to our waste. I mean,
Yeah,
it's
not at all.
everywhere. I don't have a solution for you today, Lillian, but I would say this, that we should not accept anything less than what we know to be safe, and that's a moving target off. So the people who work at Tucson Water are very, very good people and very smart people, and I would defer to their judgment on that, and get them the funds that they need. If they say we need new equipment to get this PFAS down to a safe level, as your congressperson, I would work tirelessly to get that money, not just for us, but for all people in any district that they need to recycle water, or ground, or not necessarily just recycled water, but fresh water from the Colorado, or anywhere. I mean, we've done a number on this planet, and plastics are no good. I just want to give you a quick anecdote along with that. You know, coming from the biotech industry, I see huge amounts of waste in plastics that are needless, where things can be done for a little bit more expensive, or a little larger cost on instrument design. They say, no, no, just use more disposable tips or use this. And I'm sure that's not isolated to that industry. And we really need to cut back on plastic use in general. It's not good for us. I mean, it's being found in our brains and other parts of our bodies, and we don't know what the impact is on any of that. It's just too new. You know, but every time we drink out of a Aquafina bottle, or, you know, we need to, I would support banning single-use plastics. I don't know if that's particularly popular in Congress, but that's where I stand on that.
I would strongly suggest you look at the costs that people are estimating to get PFAS down to the required levels. And I have a lot of respect for Tucson Water, but they screwed up when we went to CAP Water because they had no experience doing that. They also had no experience with PFAS. And so I think you may need expertise outside of Tucson Water to
Okay.
deal with PFAS.
Yeah.
Okay,
Definitely.
yeah, I took a note, and I will look into that. Thank you.
Lee has her hand up. Lee Oler, why don't you unmute if you're muted and give us your question?
I am unmuted. I'm ready for this. I just wanted to tell everybody that outside of Siscomani's office on Swan and Pima, I guess that's where his office is, there's going to be another protest Thursday. And I went to the last one because I don't like Siscomani at all. And I like some of his people that are, I don't know who's going to be running against him, as we don't know that yet, but a wonderful bunch of people turned up, and the signs were wonderful. And I encourage everybody to go and take part in this thing. Last time it was from 9 to 10:30. You'll have to look it up. It's under mobilize.us.
So did you have a question, Roll, or you just wanted to?
No, I'm just telling people to go on out Thursday morning. And I do have a question, if I may.
Yeah, go ahead.
I heard you, Chris, say something that I'm not sure when you said this, but you said something about nobody else was running, so I decided to run. And there are other people running, I believe. So I'm wondering.
I think
Yeah,
you
I'm
mentioned.
sorry. None of my friends or anybody that I knew, not in Tucson as a whole.
Yeah.
Yes,
No, yeah,
definitely.
there's plenty of people running for that
Yeah.
nomination. So we
Yeah.
got a couple questions.
I'm sorry, I just want to touch on the protest real
Sure.
quick.
Go ahead.
This is something that I've noticed. You know, obviously you want to be out there when there's traffic, but I'd like to see more young people be able to come out, young Democrats, and it's difficult at 9 or 10 o'clock. Again, I'm out of PTO, but you know, if there's a way to organize these where they can be at hours where people with jobs and families and everything would be able to show up, that would be, I think, really effective, because there are definitely other people who would like to attend.
Yeah,
Okay,
it would be
Chris,
nice, but better protest than no
and
protest.
my vote is as good as a young vote. And I want to know that.
Yeah,
So,
don't be ageist there.
okay, good luck, Chris.
Thank you.
All right, George McGahee in the chat has a question. He says, we have a large area in CD6 from rural and urban areas. Will you be working in Cochise, Graham, and Greenlee counties in LD19 who have different needs than those in Pima and the city of Tucson? And I would kind of contextualize this and say, what are the most pressing issues that you've been hearing from voters that you've been talking to while you've been running for office that, are maybe unique or especially pressing here in the CD6, including rural and urban areas?
Sure. Well, I want to highlight, I've spent a decent amount of time. I've been out to Safford twice. I've been out to Sierra Vista a couple times. One of the more interesting things that I heard, which I'd never really thought about, was there is no bus service between Safford and Tucson. If you don't have a car there, the best you can do is go to Phoenix. And I'm not entirely sure how I would fix that. That's not really, we don't have federal bus routes, but that's really difficult when someone needs to go to the hospital, like a big hospital facility, or go to the airport even, because Tucson is still closer than Phoenix. So that was a strange one. Everybody needs water, but they all have different problems with the water. In Sierra Vista, the San Pedro has been overpumped, and it's super critical for Fort Huachuca, but they're not connected to CAP water or the Central Arizona Project. So one thing that I would propose for Sierra Vista would be to be able to pipe out CAP water to them so that they stop overpumping and creating a cone. I'm drawing a blank on the name, but you don't want to deplete the water around the area of the river. It will cause ecological harm, and that's one of the last free-flowing rivers in the Southwest. Wilcox is a totally different situation where it's all groundwater that they're pumping there, and people are really upset about dairy farms from out of state coming in and pumping water. They're very upset. They're obviously very upset about Saudi and Chinese alfalfa.
Yeah.
Trying to think. Safford is different because they get their water from the Gila River, and it's just simply really, really too far from CAP, and it's too small of a population there to likely be able to get funding to bring CAP water out to them. But that holds back development in those regions, and I need to have more conversations with those residents to see if that's even something that they want, is more development. Some people enjoy living in the rural atmosphere. As far as Pinal County goes, I know that there's a lot of butting heads between solar industry versus agriculture versus building houses. So, competition for the land there. I would say the agriculture for, cotton or alfalfa probably needs to be rethought. But, again, I think solar panels are great. I don't think that they're great being put out in a field of natural air of land. You put them on top of houses, but otherwise build higher density power stations like nuclear. So yeah, I mean, there's like, again, there's a theme of water between all the regions, but they're all very different. So I don't know if did that answer the question?
Yeah, I think you gave some insight to that you're
Okay.
actually thinking about these issues.
Yeah.
And again, I'm going to ask some more questions here, but I'm going to let everybody know that I'm prioritizing first time questions as opposed to second time questions, given we have limited time. And we have Garth, I'm maybe mispronouncing this, Rides, asks a follow up to Mr. Donut. It is likely you would be entering Congress to find our federal government workers and organizations having been decimated. What steps would you take to help rebuild our government organizations and workforce?
I would, and again, this is going to be 2 years after the fact, but I would offer jobs back to everybody who has been unlawfully terminated or let go. The people who serve in the federal government are very special people because they work in these jobs for typically less money than private industry because they love their country and they want to help their country. And I'm livid that this has happened. So that would be something that I would want to pursue. Now, whether or not someone after 2 years of being unemployed would want to come back is another question. And also, the president will still be likely Trump in 26 and 20 or 27 when we were taking
Unless we
seats.
get
So,
real lucky or God loves us.
well, then you get JD Vance, and I don't know if that's any better. So,
Yeah, yeah,
um,
no doubt.
but that's what I would offer those workers. I would also say, from a state level, if there's anything that we can do to bring them on or create more positions for their expertise in the state, that would be nice. I know that would be difficult with our particular legislature,
Yeah.
but something to look into maybe. Pick those people up and utilize their skills.
Angel Diaz would like to know, the field is crowded, but despite that, have you managed to secure any notable endorsements for as some of your opponents have done?
I've not, no.
All right, let's go to second questions. I have a question in the chat from Paul Stapleton Smith. He wants to know about your history of unions. He says, regarding Trump's illegal union busting of our federal workers, how would you build union power to protect our workers and the urgent services they provide for Arizona?
For one, I'm a big supporter of unions. I think that they played a huge role in not only providing livable wages, but safe working environments, and also on-job training to bring to better people throughout their careers. I want to see an end to this quote unquote right to work kind of mentality. At Raytheon, we have union labor there, and I think that that's important. I would love to be in a union personally. I mean, I think that there's so much discrepancy in salary and benefits from employee to employee that it would be nice to know that we're getting a fair shake. I'm I personally am compensated well, but um, a lot of money is going to upper management and everything, and it's disproportionate. I mean, we have CEOs making 300 times as much as their workers, and unions played a vital part in preventing that. And I would make sure that you can't, like, you think firing people after they try to form a union. Like, no, I would not. Let's pass legislation that prevents that from happening. I realize that that's not a panacea. I mean, there's ways to get around everything, but
Yeah, because we already have that legislation.
yeah,
But
yeah, I know, but also uh, possibly providing legal help to people where that happens. But otherwise, I'd just be spitballing at this point. I don't have any additional answer for you on that.
well, you should definitely get with Paul to chat about that further. Susie Anderson has her hand up, one of our members. Susie, ask your question.
Thank you, Michael. Chris, I was wondering, you were talking about water, and especially in southeastern Arizona, and
Hmm.
we have had a large influx of Army and National Guard and other persons to check out our border.
Hmm.
Okay, is that having an impact on the amount of water for uh, the fort down there, for Fort Huachuca and Sierra Vista? Is that having an impact?
Nobody has said anything to me about when I've been down there, stating that that's using more water. Typically, water use for an individual is fairly light compared to the industrial use on the base and for business. So I personally doubt it, but it's something I will ask and find out. I don't know.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
Susie. Lily, why don't you unmute and ask your second question?
Okay, the Sisquamani is sponsoring something called the Flash Act, and I don't know if you know anything about it. I don't know anything about it. And he wants to have a zone that is from the border all the way up to 100 miles past the border, where not all laws and not all regulations apply. And this sounds remarkably like what Trump has done in militarizing the border, except it goes a lot further.
Yeah.
And Tucson is 60 miles from the border, so we would be well inside this 100-mile thingy that Sisquamani is sponsoring. Do you know anything about it or have any way to find out about it?
I can research it. I hadn't heard about this. I will say this. I don't support um, what's going on at the border as far as putting troops down there and creating that area or federalizing that area. And secondly, I've never been a supporter of Border Patrol inside of our country asking us if we're U.S. citizens. And I'll be just blunt on this. They've never asked me.
Mhm.
And I've driven, I had 10 acres of land in Sonora and I've been down there a million times. They never stopped me. So, it's not right. I don't want to live in America and be asked for my papers anywhere. I think that there's better ways to prevent people from crossing the border, one in the first place, but also two to track those who do. And asking citizens for their papers is not something I am for at all. But I will look into that, the Flash Act.
Mhm.
I'm putting it in the chat.
All
Oh,
right, thanks.
excellent. Thank you.
Also, I'll just note that our newest senator for the U.S., Senator Gallego, recently put out a 21-page position paper on immigration that I'd encourage everybody to take a look at, including our candidates for office. Patricia, why don't you unmute and add your voice, add your question.
Okay. So, hi, Chris. You talked about generating electricity, and you talked about solar, which we all are familiar with, and nuclear power plants. Could you do add a little bit more to that?
Sure.
Power plant
Um,
business.
Yeah, so currently about almost 30% of our electricity in Arizona is produced by nuclear. If you're familiar with the Palo Verde station up near Phoenix, that reactor was put into effect or operational in early 1980s, and it was up until recently the largest nuclear power plant in the United States. So we've had nuclear here longer than I've lived here, and it's particularly safe. But the one at Palo Verde is an older type of reactor. What I'm talking about is and not to get too sciencey, but um, currently our reactors um, create steam or they heat water, pressurized water, and that water is then used to heat another uh, section of water that spins a turbine and generates electricity, same as it would on a coal power plant. Um, Newer reactor designs, advanced reactor designs, will use a molten or liquid salt. And what that does for you is it's not pressurized. And the reason why that's better is when there's a failure of a cooling system in a pressurized power plant, um, under high temperature and high pressure, the water can turn into hydrogen gas and explode, allowing radioactive material to exit into the atmosphere. Now, liquid salt, since it's not pressurized, won't explode. It's also passively safe. And what that means is that if it loses circulation, um, the reaction just shuts down naturally. So there are a lot of added safety benefits of new reactor designs. And Bill Gates's company, TerraPower, is currently working on installing something like this in Wyoming. And it's something to look into if you want to check that out. There are a lot of other companies that are coming up with modular reactor designs. And when I say modular reactor, I mean the reactor is built in a factory and they simply bring it out and set it at the site where you need the energy. And that is going to lower the cost of nuclear energy because the designs aren't bespoke. They're not being designed and built for only one spot. They're being mass produced. And if to put it into an analogy, like if you bought an F-150 that was designed and built in your driveway, it wouldn't cost $50,000. It would cost like $3 million. So
At least. I have a question for you, and that's can you give us a preview of what you're going to be talking about, Mr. Siscomani, in the coming campaign? What is he doing wrong? How is he failing his district and his constituents? What are your big criticisms of him?
well, right now it's the IRA and gutting all of the clean energy money from the bill. Or from the act. That is a big one. For one, all of those energy subsidies and building subsidies are really popular. People like cheap energy, and we don't like coal because it's not cheaper and it's dirtier and it kills people. So I'm going to hammer them hard on that. Um, Beyond that, it would be simply being Trump's toady. I feel that as a legislature, I would want to preserve my power, my first article powers, and not delegate them to the president. What is the point in representing people when you've delegated all of your power? I don't understand that.
Yeah.
To work so hard to get to a position to be the voice of 780,000 Arizonans, and then you just say, okay, Trump, do what you want, and I'll ride along, and maybe you'll throw me a tidbit here or there. So, and that's truly what I've seen, because he secured funding for a lot of projects that were important to the district, and he's allowed that funding to be taken away. I mean, I remember $800,000 for radios for Saurita or something like that. And why would you do that? They were counting on that money. They were counting on the money for the water projects that they had in the city of Tucson. They were counting on a lot of this money. So you're just hurting your constituents. I feel when you hurt your constituents, it's pretty easy for me to come in and say, yeah, you probably shouldn't do this anymore.
You're bad at your job, buddy.
Yeah.
I heard some of the things during your discussion that reminded me of some of the recent discussion around the idea of abundance and abundance Democrats, the Abundance Caucus. I don't know if you're familiar with that at all.
Yeah,
Is that something that resonates with you?
absolutely. And in fact, when I read Ezra Klein's book, I was like, I wonder if we're the same person. You know, everything that he writes is true. And, you know, I mean, obviously, I read his book, but I had these views before reading it, and had done a lot of research prior to that, the release of that. So I would definitely be part of that, any caucus that is on that same page. Yeah.
Lillian, you got another question? Why don't you unmute and ask it?
I'm interested in what you're going to do about the military and the VA. We've got a big air base, and I think Fort Huachuca is in your district.
It is.
And I'm an Army brat. I graduated from a Department of Defense school, and what they're in Germany and what they're doing, what Trump is doing to the Department of Defense schools is horrifying. And I just wonder what you're going to do about trying to get the military and all the veterans here on your side. What you see as the issues, or, you know, you don't need to give me your strategy, just, you know, miscellaneous thoughts are fine.
Well, I definitely know that the scale back at the VA has been very problematic, and a lot of people are upset about that. I have a good friend who is a manager. He was working remotely for the VA out of Boston, and he's living here, but now he has to start going into work. So they've haphazardly set up, you know, a whole bunch of computers on a bench for people to just show up in a room, and all of a sudden we have privacy issues off the bat, because everybody can hear and see what's going on. So I don't like that, and you know, really the VA, from what I've talked to people, is a place to congregate. There's a place to shop. There's a canteen. You know, so it's very important to keep these things intact and look into ways to make them better, not reduce their quality. As far as teaching at the military academies and ROTC and everything like that, I find it surprising that so many people in the military could support Donald Trump. I mean, I have family members who were in the military who support him, and it makes no sense to me. It's almost as if maybe they didn't attend civics class or read the Constitution. I mean, which, you know, they took an oath to protect. So I would be going out to everybody and just reading to them the Constitution and making people understand how government works. You know, I was fortunate to have a really good semester-long class in high school on how the government works, and we learned how bills are passed, and, you know, we need to keep doing that. I just think people just don't understand, and they say, "Oh, I like what Trump's saying, and I'm going to do what he says." And I'm sorry. On the same note, I've seen a lot of pictures, and some of it's blog for Arizona, where there's, you know, pictures of masked government officials arresting people,
Yeah.
and I don't ever want to see a masked government official operating in this country ever, and I want to see their face. And when they do these things, And when the tide turns, and it's going to, because people are upset, we're going to hold them accountable. So when someone asks you to do something illegal or unconstitutional, you better think about that.
What I was talking about Department of Defense schools, the Department of Defense runs a school district, and it's in
Oh,
Germany, it's
I'm
all over
sorry.
Europe, it's in Asia. It's over twice as big as TUSD is. And
Okay.
so they are removing books from the library,
Mhm.
completely harmless books. Kids aren't allowed, they are not allowed to have books about women in science. They're not allowed to celebrate Black History Month or women in science or anything. What they're doing to those schools is, and I assume military people would be upset about that. Siskamani has a group of, I don't know if they're current military or if they're just veterans who advise him. You might want to see if you can get a group of military Democrats who could advise you and help you about what the issues may be, because
Yeah.
military families have a lot of issues.
Mhm.
No,
Yeah.
thank you. Yes, that's true.
Thank you, Lillian. You touched on this a little bit. There's a lot of populist anger out there, and a lot of Trump support is driven by that. People feeling like they're not getting a good shake, they're not getting a fair shake, that they're in a worse position than their parents were, that the conditions here for the average working person in America have declined. And you intimated that there are some issues in your policy agenda that sort of cross over. It might have some bipartisan appeal. I'm
Yeah.
wondering what portions of your agenda or what issues you think can steal some of that populist thunder back for the Democratic Party and get us back a lot of those voters that have went from Biden to Trump in this last election.
Well, again, I mean, if I were to say to somebody, you can continue to make the same amount of money, but work one less day, I don't, who is going to say that that's a bad idea other than maybe employers.
Yeah,
But
employers is
even that would behoove them by mandating it for everybody. I don't like policies that apply to companies over a certain size because that actually ends up hurting the smaller companies in the long run. If we change our culture over time to be 32 hours a week, we will all adapt to being 32-hour a week workers. Um, Really, it would be hard for me to understand why someone wouldn't support working fewer hours a week. Same thing with PTO. Uh, you know, I if the top or the three most wealthy people in the country are worth as much as the bottom 50%, there's at least 50% of people who would approve of having paid time off. And so these are no-brainers to me, to be able to recoup some of this the money from the oligarchy and kind of elevate people up into the middle class. Beyond that, we can talk about minimum wage. I'm not sure that's the silver bullet, but obviously there's a correlation between um, productivity gains, but not wage growth, and the minimum wage not really being raised over the past decade or several decades. I mean, I think it's still at 7 something an hour. But in Arizona, it's not. It's almost 15 an hour here, which is good. A lot of the states have raised it, but even that, it's not. That's not enough to really live effectively. So.
Yeah, well, I would point out that not everybody's on salary. So if you're proposing a 32-hour work week, you're proposing a big pay cut for those who are paid
Well,
hourly.
I'm not. I'm actually not. I'm proposing that they make the same amount of money if worked 32 hours if they were working 40 hours.
I see. So
So
you calculate their hourly wage.
their hourly wage would go up
All right.
to accommodate that.
Yeah.
Yeah. And again, overtime, I mean, I'm not saying that you can't, people count on that. And if you want to work more than 32 hours, the government's not going to say you can't. There are some countries kind of like that. Switzerland has some weird laws like that. Um, but no, I mean, I think that'd be great to say, okay, I'm going to work 32 hours, make the same amount of money, even though I'm an hourly worker. And if I work overtime, I'm going to get time and a half on top of that.
Susie Anderson just popped her hand up. Susie, why don't you unmute and ask your question?
Okay, thanks. Well, you were talking about the military. I am wondering about the VA because they're just slashing VA. Yeah, there's so many veterans that use the VA hospital. I know the U of A staffed a lot of the medical physicians at the VA. What's your how do we turn this around so that we can take care of the veterans, the men and women who fought for us?
Hmm.
What's your answer?
Well, my answer would have been to not reduce the staff levels at the VA in the first place. Since that's already happened, I would revert back to a comment I had made earlier and say, is there anything the state of Arizona can do in the meantime to help make up for the deficiencies in what's going on in the VA? Again, that's probably a no, but it's something that we can talk to our state representatives. Kevin Volk is mine. Well, the one who might actually answer my email.
Yeah.
Beyond that, I would say, can we ask our medical professionals to volunteer and help in any way possible?
Or give them incentives to do so, certainly.
Or give them incentives. Although again, I think securing the money might be difficult, but maybe there's organizations, or there's a way to raise money to do that, because that's something that I would be happy to help out with, to bring people to help the vets. I mean, again, I have several veteran family members who were treated very well by the VA, and it's not right to treat someone who went and sacrificed themselves or sacrificed their health for the safety of the rest of the country, and then treat them like this. I don't know why Juan Ciscomani is on board with this.
Yeah. Lillian, did you just want to ask about his website and how to reach him? Go ahead and unmute and ask your question. I see you're also talking to the
Yeah,
chat there.
we have to have his website so
Yeah.
people can donate to him.
Yeah, I have ActBlue set up on the website, and obviously I would appreciate contributions to help staff up and everything, but and also sign my petition. Both links are available at the homepage.
So I just want to give you the chance to close here, Chris. Any final words and thoughts before you let us go and we let you go?
Oh, well, thank you. Well, again, everybody, I really appreciate having the time to talk to you and introduce myself and introduce my campaign. I know that we are in kind of a down or a trough right now in our country, but I do want to say that I am hopeful and I'm optimistic about the future. I think that the Democrats have a very, very good chance just to flip the House, put the brakes on the remainder of the Trump administration, and then be able to rebuild this country and bring prosperity and happiness to everybody. And we have to make it through, and we're going to make it through. This country has been here for 250 years, and we're not going to let Donald Trump stop that. Thank you so much.